very good evening and welcome to BCN News. The Minister for Finance Crosley Tatui has told the Fono Ekepule not to take advantage of COVID-19 assistance. Minister for Finance Crosley Tatui was speaking during the recent deliberations on the national budget in Parliament, highlighting the assistance being provided for COVID-19 by New Zealand with an additional funding of $6 million. The minister said, quote, "Please do not make or use COVID-19 as a means to distort communications and waste our limited resources. We must remain vigilant, be expedient and compliant at all times." Unquote. Tatui said Niue is facing tough socio-economic times due to the unplanned impact of the COVID-19. As a result, a $5.7 million deficit budget has been projected. He says, "We will continue to face extreme unfavorable economic and financial circumstances during this fiscal year and perhaps the following fiscal years." On to our national budget analysis. Personnel costs of the central agencies accounts for the highest personnel or salary costs in the total budget of $4,875,000. Of all the central agencies and for the whole of government budget, the Cabinet and Parliamentary Services has the highest personnel costs of over $1.4 million. This accounts for salaries of Cabinet ministers and the members of the Assembly. As of the last amendments to the Civil List in December 2019, which prescribes the salaries and benefits of the legislators, all members of the Fono Ekepule earn an annual salary and annual allowance, which is to defray the costs incurred in relation to the official duties and representation at official functions. They also all receive a clothing allowance every 3 years. The Premier earns $80,785 per year with $10,000 annual allowance and $5,000 clothing allowance every 3 years. Ministers earn $56,789 per year with $8,000 annual allowance and $4,000 clothing allowance every 3 years. Members assisting ministers, known as MAM, receive $45,095 per year with $6,000 annual allowance and $4,000 clothing allowance every 3 years. Members of the Assembly, $31,959 per year with $4,000 annual allowance and further $4,000 clothing allowance. The Speaker receives $36,511 per year with an annual allowance of $6,000 and $4,000 every 3 years. The Civil List was amended in 2011, 2016, 2017 and in 2019. The significant changes were reflected in the 2016 Civil List with the introduction of additional allowances. The only amendment in 2019 were to the base salaries. And the Ministry of Social Services, which includes Education, Health, Justice and Community Affairs and Taonga Niue, has a total budget of $11,566,960. This is an increase from the last financial year actuals of $1,117,831. Justice and Community Affairs receives the highest of $5,288,860, an increase of $887,000. Education receives the second highest of $3,179,000 and $600, an increase of just over $200,000. Health Department, $2,755,000. Taonga Niue receives less than $500,000 at $343,500. The largest increase of over $800,000 for the Ministry of Social Services budget is allocated primarily to the Justice and Community Affairs Department, which manages the social welfare and benefits, such as the pensions. The implementation of the large chunk of funding of $4.3 million for Community Affairs, which is responsible for government subsidy and welfare benefits, is the responsibility of only 2 staff members whose combined salaries amount to $59,000. On to other stories. The New Zealand-funded scholars have had their scholarships deferred to 2021 since their repatriation from country of studies in March this year due to travel and border restrictions from COVID-19 pandemic. The New Zealand High Commission in Tāpeu confirmed to BCN News that 4 of the scholars are currently on island. 3 are from the Pacific Regional Institution and 1 from New Zealand-based institute. Majority of the New Zealand-based scholars chose to continue with their studies whilst in, during and after lockdown. As a condition for deferral, scholars will not receive any allowances until the deferral is lifted. Online studies while on deferral is at the cost of the scholar. Now the scholars are undertaking work experience in selected departments relevant to their course of study. The New Zealand Scholarships Program has changed since the COVID-19 pandemic. One of these changes implemented is to allow scholars who are in the final year of their course to complete their studies within their home country, provided that a program audit from the institute is completed and approved by MFAT. Once scholars will be qualified to complete studies in country, and program audit is currently under assessment and likely to recommence studies and entitlements of any normal scholar shortly. In March this year, tragedy struck the Hekau family when their 1-year-old Robin Hekau was involved in a car accident at their residence in Paliasi. BCN News visited the family earlier this week. This is the story of Rob's recovery. The toddler suffered a traumatic brain injury after he was hit by a car on their driveway and was medevaced to New Zealand for treatment. Rob, who is the youngest of 7 children, was admitted at the intensive care unit of the Starship Hospital in Auckland during the lockdown.
And he suffered, as it was described to me by medical professionals, he had suffered a traumatic brain injury, which meant that there were fractures to his skull, the front and the back of his skull, and his brain was shook inside his skull, which resulted in bruises to his brain and lesions to his brain. So we were medevaced to New Zealand and we received help from there, and we were in Starship Hospital and different facilities for health care in terms of his recovery.
For the months during his recovery, no family members were allowed to visit. Only his mother stayed by his side at the ICU. He was discharged from hospital in July and returned to Niue with his mother.
We think he's back to, they call it back to baseline, and we think he's back to normal, but with his injuries, because he's young, we will never fully know, and with each milestone we come across it, then we will know. If some things don't work out the way it's supposed to, then we know those systems were affected. But we're just very grateful that he's still here with us today after everything.
Shanta Hekau believes her son survived thanks to faith, prayers and fasting by family and friends.
No parents should experience, and this Rob is number 7 of 7, and it still happened to us. And we're just happy that he's here today, and we would like to thank everybody on the island, everybody that remembered us in their prayers. It was especially hard for us because when we went to New Zealand, it was during level 4 lockdown, and nobody was allowed to come and see us. So there were many nights I was in ICU and I cried by myself, and the doctors had told me that I should not expect to have my son back. And for a moment I knew that was science, but I also knew that we are people of faith, and I knew that a lot of people were praying for us, and I chose to hold on to that. So thank you to the whole island, to everybody for praying and fasting for us. If anything, that got us through. And I also thank the advances in medicine for helping us. And I just want to say Whakawelahi for all the prayers and all the help to me and my family.
And that's BCN News for tonight. Thank you for joining us. Do join us same time next Monday. Until then, have a safe weekend.